We're
Now
alive.
now they give us a little note that says we are live, whereas before I would just cut off the first 5 words of every sentence I said because I thought it would go live right after I push the button. But now we are live, I'm assuming.
I love it.
So 48-hour art check, and I keep forgetting to keep track. We're approaching 170, I know. I can't remember how many, though.
Yeah, I think we're on like 167, I think.
Yeah.
Which is insane. It's insane that we've done that many of these things. So.
And I see you got my memo about wearing a matching light blue shirt. So.
Yes, my lovely shirt, classic Tom Burns. I love this one.
Oh, that's great. Oh man, and Squatchy's in the chats. What's up, man? All right, let's jump in. What have you gotten done?
I had to share that. I just think that's awesome that he's checking out our stream whilst being in the drive-thru getting chicken. Good luck, sir. Good luck.
Nice. Now I want chicken.
I know, that makes me want drive-through chicken, and we're doing an art check. Okay, anyhow, so chicken aside, so what'd you get? Did you already ask me?
I can go. It's fine. Okay, so I got this guy done, and he moves, and I did a video kind of cataloging like how he does that and why that controller is freaking out. But the gist of it is, if I move this controller to the left or to the right sideways, then he goes front and back. And if I go up and down, then he does that. And then his eye can be kind of animated with this thing. And so
that is so cool with the reflections and stuff. Holy crap, man.
Yeah, it's fun. And then if you take him, let's see, I'll show you another one that I did. I think I just screwed it up though. Where'd the fly eye controller? Give me oh well, I shouldn't do this on the air. Walk, there we go. That's what I was looking for. Give me my things. I need to delete that one. There we go. Yeah, you can just make him just walk across. So if he goes like this, you can just have him kind of just skitter across the screen. And if you want him to go faster or slower, then you can just grab this and I'll just make him like walk slower by moving these apart. Come back over here, move these apart. Now he goes slower. So
that's so rad.
Yeah, so he's pretty well animated, but he looks better when he's faster. And had a bunch of huge problems that I did not anticipate, so I missed out on almost everything else that I was supposed to do. So just that guy in the video. That's all I've got.
Still pretty impressive though, man.
Yeah, thanks. It was fun.
I think those little like the little touches, like the eye having that light really starts to kind of make the illusion of like it being further than After Effects. Like there's just little things you're doing that you're still doing with After Effects, but that like if you're not paying super close attention, you'd be fooled to think like some of this stuff is 3D or just like traditional. And I think that's pretty amazing, just some of the tricks you're doing with it. It's cool to see.
That's what I'm going for. So yeah, and I'm trying to have all the I'm trying to have the eye of everything be that kind of weird ripply water effect, just to try to texture the surface and stuff. Anyway,
that's so cool.
It's fun, but I missed the goal that I hit. So
shame.
Yeah.
No, I still I won't let you feel bad because like I think that you've been taking on with the with what you've mapped out. You're asking a lot of yourself. So
yeah, and I built in some wiggle room, so I'm using that wiggle room now. And I
like benching pretty heavy weight. You can't feel bad if it's like maybe 20 pounds lighter than you thought you'd hit. Like you're
right.
benching, as far as I'm concerned, benching far past most people's weight. So
yeah. So how about you?
Okay, I am. Let me show this. This is what I've gotten done so far. Not quite where I want to be, but I think I'm pretty much where I thought I'd be. Although I was kind of speculating that I might be able to get to like starting some of this down here. It's going to be a bunch of floating heads, but I'm still pretty happy with how it came out. So yeah,
Cool.
So that's kind of where I'm at. But I'm one step closer to getting to finish. Let me show them my script here for like till it gets to the end of the book. Hang on, I'll close this out. But just so you guys can see how close to finished. So that's where I left off. That's the chunk I have left. That's it. And then,
that's rad.
So kind of stoked.
That is awesome.
Yeah.
So challenges for me, had a client kick in to full gear. So working on that a little bit, and it's kind of a challenging thing. And then working on a logo. And then part of my animation, I realized that I could spend like 6 hours looking for the right angle in an image and then buy it or whatever. Or I could just drive 30 miles down the road and take all the pictures I need. So that's what I did today. So I hopped on the motorcycle and spent the afternoon photographing different things that I need for the scenes that I'm making. So I have all that stuff, but that was kind of like a setback in time. And then just normal sleeping things. My sleep schedule's not working like I wanted it to, so I keep staying up past 5 a.m. But I'm still waking up at like 12:30, and so I'm like getting less sleep as I stay up later, which is not the point. So, yeah, we forgot to do physical stuff. But anyway, what about you for challenges?
Oh man. So we got through one show, and there's like 4 in a row that are just gonna hit like nonstop until basically the end of October.
Mm-hmm.
So we are just flooded right now because that's like go time. So just kind of maintaining mental clarity when you're firing. I've talked about that before, but it's like when you're art directing and you're in a peak season, it's like you're firing on so many cylinders, and your attention is split so many ways just to kind of get everybody out and get everything out.
Right.
By the time I'm commuting home, I'm just like my brain feels like it's been on a grill, just like flipped around a couple times. So it's like it's hard to kind of, for me, it's more just like focus has been a real struggle because I too have not been sleeping a ton, and that of course affects your clarity. And so it's like more of trying to kind of push myself to my maximum, but still. Like we did some recording yesterday, and I've managed to hit my mark on that and on all my comic stuff. So I'm feeling, but very similarly, I had a client reach out that wants me to do a new line, and they're starting me with two t-shirt designs, and they're just too fun to turn down, and it's too good of a client. It's a client in Germany that I do a lot of like t-shirt design and branded their store and all sorts of stuff. And they're an old client. They hire my wife as well. So it's just kind of an ideal situation because it's like we make like half the products they sell. Like between the two of us, it's like probably about 89% of the products. So it's too fun, and the work's fun. And so, but like, once again, it's like, I'm always split where I'm like, we could use the extra money, the work's fun, but like, well, I think we're in a similar boat with that, but it's like, how do you, that's a struggle where it's like, and it's a good struggle to have. And I know anybody who's like hungry for illustration works, like, hears anybody complain or feel like even sound like they're complaining about freelance coming. Like, it's like, I understand that I'm fortunate to be in that situation, but I do know it's going to pull time from the personal projects. And that's not really negotiable for me, like the time on personal projects. So it's like, how do I, that's a challenge that's going to be interesting. But it's not like anything I haven't dealt with before, but I think it'll be interesting to see how we both handle that, like the freelance on top of the job, on top of the personal projects,
Yeah. I mean, my plan was to do 4 hours on each one, and it's just not happening. So I'm able to get about 5 or 6 hours of work in, but I haven't been able to get 8 to 10 like I had hoped. So yeah, I don't know. We'll have to see, because I wanted to do like a chunk, but I just need to get started earlier in the day before my daughter gets home from school. So anyway, it's kind of just, I just want to hang out with my family, and I'm home. And so I get to, and school's going to start soon and all that. Victor says that I look tired. and I agree that that's probably the way I look, because I feel tired.
Yeah.
I didn't get as much sleep as I needed to last night. And then I did like a 75-mile motorcycle ride. And then I've been working since then after I ran 2 miles. So
yeah, that'll get you.
I am tired.
I didn't even notice, this is just on the subject of tired, but until we started going live, I didn't even notice that like one of my eyes is just like, dude, you haven't slept, screw you, and left a red mark. I'm like, these are battle wounds.
Yeah.
And I met someone today who's reading War of Art because of my recommendation.
Oh, rad.
Like all pumped about like fighting resistance, and I was like, yes, that's a good fight to have. But like after the conversation, I was like, yeah, I gotta fight this.
Right. Yeah. Also, taking a nap is okay.
Oh yeah, naps are good.
So anyway, plans. Oh, let's do workouts before plans. So I've run twice this week. So I missed yesterday, ran Monday, ran today. Yesterday I did pull-ups. Monday I did pull-ups. I haven't done any pull-ups today. And I'm on 2.5 weeks of intermittent fasting and replacing 2 of the 3 meals I'm eating with protein shakes and meal supplements. And so I'm down. Hard. Yeah, it's probably one of the reasons why I'm tired too. I'm trying some different things that I don't think are giving me enough calories yesterday. And so I think that's spilling into today. But yeah, I'm down 4 pounds. So it's good.
That is good.
Yeah. So I think 3 or 4. I can't remember. I don't really measure that much. But yeah. So that's going well. How about your workouts?
I upped my weight on lifting, so that's pretty good. It's like, I don't even want to say the weight amount because it's very tiny, but it's like, it's good for me. And I felt it a lot. I was like, oh, this is a little different. It's like you literally, I'll say it. It was like 5 pounds extra.
Yeah.
And I swear, just that 5 pounds, because your body gets like, it hurts like hell. And then it gets so used to it that you can kind of, and then you start stretching the stats a little longer and you're like, yeah, I can do like 1 more set of 10 or whatever. But then once you just add like a little bit more weight, it's like, oh, wow. Okay. This is not going to be an easy 10 here. And then the next 10 is going to be harder, but it was worth it. And then, I did miss a day because yesterday, we have these like little windows of time for, my band practices every Tuesday. And then if we're not able to all get together, my friend Josh and I kind of write all the music for the band and stuff like that. we are at that point with our demo where we just need to do guitar tracks over rough tracks. And so we just went in and like plugged in as much as we could get done in like an hour and a half, and which is really grueling to do studio work. It's like, it sounds so fun, I think, to people who aren't musicians, like the idea of like just hanging out with the band and recording. Yeah. But this weird thing happens the second you press record. Like the things you can play a million times in front of an audience, just suddenly it's like a big mind game. So anyhow.
And for me, it always, like, not that I've ever been in that situation, but like when I'm on the clock,
yeah,
I'm like, that mistake just cost me money.
Yeah.
So that's where, yeah.
100%. And that's the thing, is like, we're not paying for the recording, but we're taking the time of the person who is recording us out of the graciousness of their heart.
Right.
And so there's always that weighing over you where you're like, oh man, I can't mess up this thing. I can't mess this up because this guy is counting. And then you psych yourself out, and then you mess up 40 times. And then you get in that feedback loop of, actually, that would be a good topic for another one. It's like the idea of like the psych out, where, because I've seen it happen with designers a lot too, where it's like you know, your head messes with you, and then it becomes a loop of like self-fulfilling prophecy. Anyhow, I did also want to mention that Squatchy filled us in that he is at Popeyes. And I'm telling you, if you are ordering at Popeyes, man, get the biscuits, because those buttery, weird, awesome biscuits, I can't explain it, but they're just perfect.
Okay, I can't eat until 1 p.m. tomorrow, so we got to start talking about food.
Okay.
So, how about plans? I am here. Did that come up? That came up. So. I got the design of that character that I was showing done, but I'm behind on these 5 things, though I have them in various stages of progress. So probably before I go to bed tonight, I will knock those out.
Amazing.
But definitely before tomorrow night. And then I'll be working on that theater scene, is the crowd scene in there. And I'm actually, some of this stuff is part of some of this stuff. So basically by the end of the week, I'll have all 7 of these things done. And that'll put me in the right spot for the final week. And that'll be it. So, and then I also need to write a contract and send an invoice and bid a animation project, and then do the animation project and do a logo.
Man.
So those are my plans.
By the next check?
I'm not going to finish that animation, but I do need significant progress on it, and the paperwork done, and the logo. Yep, I do. I need that done by the next check.
Well, I also keep forgetting, like, you don't have school at this point, so that at least is off the plate. But you do have kids to watch.
Yeah, and next week I will be prepping for the semester to start. So
yeah.
So next week school doesn't start, but my work starts. So anyway, but we'll get this done before then.
You will.
And then I'll probably just noodle with it. I'm going to run it by a few professional animators and stuff that I know, and get some advice on what to do with it on the marketing end. But I just want to get it done before that. So perfect. Yeah. How about you for your plans?
So I just need to finish this page. I'm guessing, let's see. Oh, wait a minute. I'm forgetting. Okay. It's Wednesday. So we had an art check. This is how tired I am. We had an art check on Monday. That's why I was like, wow, that's a lot you're going to do. I forgot. We got till Monday.
Yeah.
Yeah. By Monday, I was going to say, like, I don't know if by Monday I should have all the rough pencils finished. I should have probably at least gotten one of the designs done for that freelance client, but I'm hoping to get both. And then I have some house cleaning, like literal house cleaning. Like we have a garage that is piled with stuff and needs to be attended to. So that's going to be a thing. And I think that's basically it. Like, and so that's realistically what's going to happen. Ideally, it'd be cool if I already started thumbnailing the next page. So, yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. Cool. Well, that sounds good. I like that. So how long do you think until you're done with the comic completely?
Completely? Maybe a month.
Cool.
But then that's just interiors, you know, and then I got to do author page. I got to do spine cover, back cover design, do a little bit of research on where I'm going to print it.
But while you're doing all that, we can start talking marketing, right? Because I've been not waiting for you, but using that as an excuse.
Yeah.
Because I've got a completely finished book. I have a completed book that I stopped shopping around, and I need to get back into that. So.
No, I think that'll be really helpful. Maybe we can start pushing each other to try new things and to continually be trying new things to kind of get those books out.
Yeah.
And also different routes and avenues, and like, you know, maybe even make a challenge out of it, spin that into the Artcheck just to see how far we can get with stuff we have finished, you know, because we both talked about that as a weakness where it's like and I think Scott mentioned it too, so maybe he'll want in on this, but we all talk about the idea that it's very easy for us as creators to get really motivated about projects while we're making them, but the aftermath is like kind of a weak spot for a lot of us. Like the whole like, hey, look what I did. Like we'll do that briefly, but there's not a lot of longevity to it. And I think
what I really need is a publicist. That's
yeah. But I think kind of similar to like the advice that we talked about when you were starting the project on animation, where I was like, just be your own art director. And then you kind of mapped it out, and it's been a little like more successful, I think, than if you hadn't.
Right.
Same thing. We got to just be our own marketing department, because we've both done marketing for people professionally. We know a lot of things we should do. We just aren't doing those things.
I got out of that game because I hated it so much.
I know. I know. But you love the book you finished.
I know. It's true.
Yeah.
And the 6 people that I've read it really enjoyed it. So, all right. Let's do our topic.
Yeah.
So let's see. Where are we? Oh, I wanted to point out that I'd rather be drawing. Still going strong on the Artcheck. Kayla still going strong on the Artcheck. There's lots of really good Artchecks out there. Today's topic is online behavior, authenticity versus oversharing. And the reason that we were talking about this is because I think I think Josh and I really like nuanced topics where there's not a clear-cut answer, because I just like nuance in life in general. But nuanced topics are really interesting. So the idea is this: I've seen people tank their careers because they were honest. I've seen people tank their careers because they were playing a part. They were being dishonest. They were playing this weird online version of who they wanted to be or who they wanted people to think they were. And I think both of those are really problematic.
Yeah.
But I also think that you should be aware of situations. And so like I say in class, like, it's not that a wetsuit is inappropriate. It's that a wetsuit when you're not surfing is inappropriate. Just as much as like a shirt and tie would be inappropriate when you're surfing. It's not inappropriate at work, right? And so when you're like in different environments, I don't think it's inauthentic to be aware of the consequences of your actions in that environment. So
Yeah.
like if I'm, talking to my wife, that is a different environment and a different situation than when I'm speaking with students, than when I'm speaking with saying things online on Twitter or on YouTube or whatever. And um, I don't know if this is like a universal problem, but I've noticed that being there's you and I are kind of in this little niche. There's two terms, digital natives and digital pioneers. And we're kind of in that niche of a digital pioneer where we remember and were raised in an environment where we saw all of this come to pass.
Yeah.
And anybody born after 1995, right? They have never known what it's like to be. This is true. James Bond or John Wick can pull off a shirt and tie on a surfboard, but they've got like a whole camera crew and makeup and everything to help them out. So anyway, but they've never known anything else, right? And so they're unaware of like the consequences of a lot of their behavior. Whereas I was around when people cared that Google read your email. Now people just assume that they do and don't care, right? And I was around when people freaked out when they found out that your phone knew your location and was broadcasting that to third parties. And now people are aware of that and don't care, right? And so I think there's some level of sensitivity to being a digital pioneer of like how to act. But then beyond that, there are people that, slightly older than me, that maybe are, and it doesn't necessarily have to be an age, it's more of an attitude, proclivity towards things. Cause like my 90-year-old grandfather was pretty techie, but like there are people that are in a different mindset that, would just post all kinds of things online. And you're like, whoa, that's not something that you want to share publicly, And so I just wanted to talk about that from the standpoint of an artist, from the standpoint of a professional. I think it's kind of interesting to think about. One thing that I kind of enjoy is I think people would be hard pressed to accurately describe my political beliefs. One thing that I try to do online is I choose my battles and I don't shy away from things, but I've never come out and said, I'm a Republican or I'm a Democrat or I'm a this or I'm a that, because that becomes divisive to the point where it would get in my way. I'm not trying to be a political correspondent. I'm not trying to, do something along those lines. What I'm trying to do is I'm trying to get my work out there. I'm trying to get my art out there. I'm trying to get my message out there. And so I avoid things not because I'm scared of the backlash or whatever, but because it's anti my goals. Like it doesn't help forward what I want to do. And I think that there are people in this community, you and I, good friends of mine, lots of people that we disagree on all kinds of things.
Yeah.
And somehow in person, we're able to not let that impact our interactions, but online it becomes very divisive. So that's just an example. But that also means that like, if there's something that some people might consider political that I have a problem with, I will draw an editorial cartoon about it. I will go on a Twitter rant about a thing, right? But I don't necessarily say, that like I'm of this party and, all this type of stuff, and everybody who isn't is dumb. So there's kind of like some people I know, because they've called me this on Twitter, that know that I do this, consider me to be inauthentic because I do that. But I consider it to be opening and inviting, and I'm still authentically who I am. And I answer questions and have conversations about those things. So it's kind of an interesting balance. And I don't have any real hard or fast rules.
Yeah.
But it's just kind of one of those things. And I've seen people on both extremes where they're completely fake, or they're open about everything to their own detriment.
Yeah. Yeah. It's an interesting thing. And I think the line has to be, like we said at the beginning, it's like this is definitely one of those gray areas where I think the boundary has to be kind of drawn by yourself using just rational thought.
Right.
But like for me, I'm pretty political, and I'm not political like I'm not running for office, but I donate to certain activist organizations. I I will march in rallies. I will get pretty loud about like politicians I disagree with. And I feel like that actually doesn't really hurt my brand. And one thing I'd also say is like that I'm always very cautious and careful to do is like, I'm not going to say that somebody can't buy my book, meaning like I don't care what your political beliefs are. If you want to buy my book, that's great. And I'm also working on a book that's like extremely confessional and kind of not safe for work kind of way. But that's the book. But I do make sure that my conduct online isn't something that were I to see a snapshot of it at work or somewhere else, I would be like, oh no, like I'm in, like, meaning I'm careful and measured with my words, and I try to make sure I'm being fair.
Yeah.
And I'm also aware that there are people out there who are reading it. So it's like, I'm not just kind of treating it like a journal. And
right.
that's kind of that. Whereas like my own work, my own art, it's like, I don't really feel like I need boundaries with that. If I need to get into some really heavy territory and it's necessary for the story, that's where I have to go. But with my conduct on social media, I kind of measure it, and I have to measure it. That's part of my job. I mean, part of my day job and my job as an illustrator, where I can hopefully present like a version of myself that isn't going to be going off the rails. However, I think I'm a little more vocal about my political viewpoints and stuff. And that could, that's a risk that I know is a risk when I do it. It's like, it's a risk I feel I've measured it and I feel it's worth taking because I really passionately believe those things. Yeah. But it's one of those things of like doing it with measurement and it is a hard thing to navigate, but I have seen some people go past like, and I think this might be where you and I would like definitely agree on kind of conduct online. I've seen people go from being like expressing their political thought to then jumping and making a blanket judgment about another human being because they have a party they support, right. And without even a dialogue with that person. That to me is like, that's one of those lines that's pretty clearly delineated in the sand where I think, when if you're jumping down people's throats and making blanket assertions about what they believe just because, they vote for the Green Party. I'm just thinking of a third party that won't be super contentious. You know what I mean? But you're like,
Ralph Nader is going to be so angry at you right now.
Yeah. But you think this because you have that on your profile. I think that's where you get into dangerous territory. However, I also think there's sometimes where being too held back could be detrimental to your career.
Yeah.
In the sense of like, if you're a comedian who's like supposed to be contentious and that's part of your brand, like I cannot imagine like somebody trying to have like a Howard Stern type career, just hugging the rail. Like you kind of have to just go all out to have that kind of career. But even in that case, I think it should be a conscious thought, like I'm going to go for this off the rails kind of career,
right?
Where, and when you make that choice, like there's going to be repercussions to it, where, and that can be a huge marketing asset, but it could also be a real liability when it comes to like professional life. If let's say that doesn't work,
Yeah. Well, I mean, for every Howard Stern, there's thousands of jerks out there who think they're Howard Stern that can't get a job because they act like that. Yeah. So that's another thing. Victor posted an interesting comment. When YouTube was first starting, a few coworkers at a company I worked for posted a video of them fooling around at work and were fired immediately. Yet now the company kind of expects you to post about the company. And so I find the work-life balance kind of an interesting thing, because I don't actually believe that you can be a different person in different situations. I'm not one of those people that's like, like at work, I'm like this, and at home, I'm like this. And I don't think that's true. And so for me to be authentic, I try to become someone who is who I want to be. And like, I'm not trying to represent myself accurately. I'm trying to become the type of person that I would like people to see me as. And I think that's really an interesting thing. But here's an interesting thing. If I'm online and I talk about, like, let's say that I've done this a number of times, where I find something interesting. There's a correlation between something that's happening currently in the political arena and something that happened in like ancient Greece. I find that fascinating, and I will often point those things out. And it's fascinating to me because I intentionally don't, because I don't believe this, I intentionally don't call out any political party or group and say, you guys are the bad guys because blah, 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 blah. But what I find interesting is that people tend to react as if I did that.
Yeah.
And so, I don't know if it's just me being tricky. I don't think it is, because I don't feel like, all Democrats are evil or all Republicans are evil or whatever. But it's an interesting thing because I'm still not shying away from the topic, but I'm approaching that in a way that does cause people, some reaction. Given that there are people that will lose their jobs based on things that they say online when they're not on the clock.
Yeah.
And that's a reality of the workforce today.
Yeah. So just chiming in on that, like even that comment about the YouTube video, like you have to think what that says to a company when that goes live. You're literally broadcasting wasted resources to an entire, like, to your customer base, to
right.
your boss. And so like, while like, and you're doing it, you're representing a company without approval. And that's a really big issue too. So like there's legal issues with what those people did in that scenario. So I can totally see why they lost their job. Now, I think that was the right call? I don't know. I wasn't there. I don't know the details of it. But I'm just saying, like, when you're in a workplace environment, coming at it with not a fakeness, but a sense of wisdom, is, I think, a really good thing. And a lot of people, especially like young, new designers, struggle with like parsing the idea of authenticity with the idea of just filter. And there's kind of a difference between using a filter and pausing and kind of thinking before going off the cuff, and then and being inauthentic. One is like, like just the thought of like, is this worth saying? Could this have ramifications? Would this, like in the case of that YouTube video, I would think just like for a second, like, could this be taken wrong? Could this look like it's like Corey talked about on an Artcheck, and I want to give it back to Corey in a second, but what he talked about on an earlier art check, where he was saying he was working as a foreman, or not a foreman, but you were working in construction, and you were explaining that like sometimes like when people had to do this certain thing, they have to like, well, you can probably do that story. Can you recap that one?
If I remember what you're talking about, you need to give me more details.
Oh, well, so like people were like laying plank or something. And
oh, right.
Like, in order to lay plank effectively, they have to sit down. But the problem is from a distance, that looks like you're just sitting on the job. So whenever the foreman would drive by, they'd all stand up like and do it, even though it was inefficient, because they were aware that perception of that person in that truck affects the reality of how they're viewed by that person. Yep. Like, and then if they try to explain that perception, it's going to come across as defensiveness. So it's like, which never goes well. So it's like there's scenarios and that goes outside of the workplace. That's like, you can be misperceived anywhere you go, and it can have a massive effect on your life, regardless of intention. Yeah. So that's where like just a little wisdom, especially in the workplace, because I feel like when you're on the internet and you're building your own brand and stuff, you can kind of define a lot of those things for yourself. But when you're talking about a company somebody else built, that's their call. Like what they want people perceiving about their company, what they want being shared about their company, what they want, what they perceive based on what you put out there. You're a private, I'm guessing this company was probably a private company. And so that's literally their call. I mean, it's like if I started a company from the ground up and had some employees who wanted to just post random things about where I work, I would really want them to be measured when they talk about it. You know what I mean?
Oh, absolutely. And I mean,
measuring and fakeness aren't the same thing. And that's
I think that's a huge example of the misunderstanding of what being authentic is. It reminds me of Tracy Morgan on 30 Rock, where he's like, I'm dropping truth bombs, and he kept like losing jobs, and nobody was hiring him to do stuff, and and like another character was like, well, how's that working out for you? I mean, great, you're being like radical honesty or whatever, but like you're ticking everybody off, and nobody you're radioactive, nobody can touch you, right? You can still be honest and authentic. It reminds me, there was an event that happened. I worked in the music industry for a little bit, and in the music industry, it's a very difficult time to own a music store, because it used to be probably 20 years ago plus, which in the life of a store isn't that long, right? But 20 years ago, when there was a downturn in the economy, music store sales would go up. But now when there's a downturn in the economy, they're hit pretty hard, and it's because people have video games and they've got other things. There are things that people can do. And there were articles written on this and everything, where like Rock Band at the time, with that video game where you got to pretend like you were a rock star, was probably negatively impacting people buying guitars, because they were able to get an easier wish fulfillment. Like picking up this plastic guitar with no frets, just these 9 giant buttons, or whatever. You didn't actually have to learn how to play the guitar, right? Whereas if you have to tighten your belt a little bit, and it's like, all right, we can't go on that cruise, we can't do this vacation, but I could go spend $50 and like get my guitar kind of fixed up, and or whatever. And so there's still like money flowing to the music stores. Anyway, so this is that time period where there was a downturn in the economy, and it didn't do what it traditionally had done for music stores, right? And I was in a B2B, B2C situation where I was selling direct to consumers, and I was also selling to music stores. So I was on the wholesale side of things. And there was this video that came out that everybody thought was so funny. And it was this dude who was working at a music store, filming himself making fun of, with his face, this kid playing a guitar in his music store. So he had come in and he was doing all the things that everybody hates. He was trying to play Smoke on the Water. He was trying to play Enter Sandman. He was trying to play Stairway and all that stuff. And it was okay, but it wasn't great. And he was like cringing and everything. And anyway, it went viral within this community of music store owners. And then somebody pointed out that like, is this how you want your customers to perceive their experience at your store? Like, do you want people to think that if they don't know how to play well, that they shouldn't come to your store? Like, you're alienating a huge segment of your customer base for a few cheap clicks and a few laughs. And what they didn't think through was that, you know, people knew that guy, right? I mean, if you're a musician or a wannabe musician, a beginning musician, an up and coming musician, you know the music salesman at your local music store. Like you're aware of them, you know their names. Like you probably go in and look at that guitar, you know, every day on the way home from school for a few months before you're able to save up enough to, like, you know, make a purchase or make a decision or whatever. Like, that's what music stores are. And so you come across something like that online.
Yeah.
That could be the deal breaker that you're never going to get into music. And so, like, it resonated with a lot of people because a lot of people had that experience where it's just cringeworthy to listen to people who don't know how to play. Like I worked above a studio where they gave beginning violin lessons, and I can't even tell you how horrible of a sound it is to, like, hear, you know, 15 kids learn the violin. It's like strangling cats. It's the worst. But at no point in time would any rational thinking human being walk downstairs and start making fun of those kids and being like, man, you guys sound terrible, 9-year-old, you know, that's awful, blah, 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 blah.
And to put this better in context too, it's like if you were the violin teacher and then filming that's kind of more of the scenario, because this guy's, you know, he's an employee of the store, like,
right. And so my point was, he didn't make fun of that person directly. Like, he didn't. This is one thing where I think people who have this argument about authenticity in the filter become, they don't understand. Like, if you're such a unaware jerk that you would actually say something to someone's face to intentionally hurt their feelings, then I don't know how to tell you. But if you look at a bunch of 9-year-olds playing the violin poorly and your initial thought is, you know, well, at least they're trying, have that thought when you're online, right? You don't go online just because it's not a face-to-face experience and do the same thing.
Yeah, 100%.
Because I actually find that the anonymity and the bravery that you see, the brassness that you see online to be less authentic, because I don't think that would really happen in real life.
Yeah.
In most situations.
No, that makes a lot of sense. I think the key thing, I think, especially in a workplace, is just kind of assume everything's being recorded. And I know that sounds nuts, but, and, you know, people could take that the wrong way and be all paranoid about it. But if you're in a workplace, like, just assume, like, you're being watched, and assume, like, you know, if you're writing an email, like, there, you know, most workplaces have IT, so those emails are being read. Like, assume, like, just be your best self, and like, be your best self where you wouldn't mind it being played back. And like, in a scenario like that, there's no losing. With the internet, you know, you really have to measure how authentic you are with, like, what risks you're willing to take. Like, for instance, for me, because I'm a liberal and stuff, it's like, you can see on my Facebook, I wear, like, a math hat, which is like an Andrew Yang hat. And it's my profile picture right now because I'm my guy's in the running and I'm excited about it. Yeah. Now, like, would I wear that to work? No. If someone asked me at work, how I felt about the election and who I was standing for, I'd instantly tell them. I'd have no problem with that. But I'm not, like, once again, that's a measurement in itself, because I'm not going to work wearing that hat and telling people, vote for this guy. Because if I did that, I'd be out the next day, and justifiably, because like, what right? I'm in a position of authority. What right would I have to tell people who aren't in the same like league, like who might feel swayed by my statements, like how they should vote or how they should live or anything like that? That's not my job. And like, so there is for me, there is a dichotomy between the way I will behave at work and the way I behave online. However, you'll notice, like, when I talk about my work, I'm measured with that. And the reason is I have to be. I've thought it through. You have to be kind of rational about it. And you have to think about the stakes for the other person involved. And I think that goes just across the board with work and professionalism. What are the stakes for the people involved in what you're doing online?
Right.
What's the worst case scenario for them? And if you kind of consider that, it might kind of make your conduct a little better, and realize, like, the internet is forever. So what you post online, it's very hard to make things that you post online disappear. Yeah. And so once again, like I said, just try to consider, whatever you put out there, don't be surprised if when you're at a job, somebody Googles you before they hire you. I mean, what would you do if you wanted to hire somebody? Like, let's say you started a job, like a business tomorrow, and you wanted to hire somebody. You do the same thing you do when, like, if we were going to interview someone, or you're wanting to check out someone's podcast or their YouTube channel, you Google them. You go, what's this person all about?
Yep.
And if in there you see just swarms of hate comments on YouTube videos or something, or just swarms of just hate spilling from this person, you're going to think do I want to work around swarms of hate? That sounds like a liability. And right. Corey's talked about, everything in business is risk mitigation. So, if you're projecting mass risk, that might be something to consider. But once again, that can also be a marketing tactic, depending on what you want to do. Because sometimes that can be good. If you want to be in with some really fringe political group, and that's your base client, well, you're probably going to have to get fringe and political to get to that person,
Yeah, and it's super interesting because there's so many moving parts to it, and there's so many different, and that's why I think this is a topic that you and I liked, because there's no clear cut path to the way that you should do it. But I had a situation where I was working at a very traditional company, right? They were very straight laced. There are some companies that I worked for where you show up in shorts and sandals and it's not a big deal. There are other companies I worked for where the expectation is pretty much like a shirt and tie, and doing very similar things. That's why it always bugs me when people say the industry is like this. I'm like, the industry is all over the place. Some companies are like that, but other companies are like this, and some companies there's a mix or whatever of everything. But this particular company happened to be on the more conservative side of dress and behavior and things like that. Very, very old school, respectful, kind of business dress. And anyway, with that, there was a guy that interviewed, and I can be vague so that's still legal. There was a guy that interviewed and interviewed very well, and I did exactly what you said. And I went online, and this will date this story. I went online and I found his MySpace page, and I was just like, whoa. And my initial thought was, if this is what this guy is comfortable sharing publicly online, I'm not sure that I can trust him to make good decisions on my team.
Yeah.
And it wasn't that he wasn't qualified, And it wasn't that I necessarily agreed or disagreed with anything that he said, but just the fact that he was willing to post the pictures that he was posting and say the things that he was saying in a public setting like MySpace, to me said, it's too risky, right? Because when I hire somebody, I'm putting my name on the line, right? And I win or lose political capital inside of that company based on that. I remember we hired a guy. My boss hired a guy one time. That was a terrible hire, and like 2 weeks later, he calls me into his office and says, "Hey, I need you to sit here for this conversation." And I was like, "What?" and it was like because I was the director of marketing at the time. And so it was like a write-up. Like we were writing him up with, you've got a week to turn this around. If you don't turn this around, then we're going to have to terminate your job. This is 2 weeks after he was hired. And a week later, I get pulled into his office again. And he's like, "All right, we asked you to change these things. Didn't see a significant enough improvement. So we need to let you go." And so there was a longer conversation about that. Then that guy left, and then he turned to me and said, "I made a mistake in hiring that guy because, I saw some things online that were kind of whatever, but I mean, he interviewed well and everything. And it's really important when you make a mistake in business to clean it up as quickly as you possibly can." Yeah. As soon as I saw that it was a mistake, I owned it to the C-suite and I fixed it. And so that's, those red flags are really, really kind of important. And it's because of that risk management. It's because of those decisions that we make. Like, for example, I have students that totally drop the ball on a group project in a class or something, and then ask for a letter of recommendation later. And I'm like, I can't in good conscience put my name on a letter that says good things about you right now. I'm hoping that changes. I'm hoping that there are mitigating circumstances, but my experience, I remember a guy that I worked with, and I kind of gave him a little heads up, and I said, "Hey, listen, I know you're going through some stuff. I need you to make these changes. This is informal. We're at lunch. We're both clocked out. But if you don't turn this around, it's going to be an issue." And he didn't. And so, he was let go. And then 2-3 years later, we were still on cordial terms, and it wasn't that big of a deal or whatever. He was applying for a different place that I had changed jobs, and he was applying for a job there. And he's like, "Hey, can you give me a letter of recommendation?" And I was so awkward because I had to say, "Hey, listen, man, it's been years, it's been like 5 years, and I'm sure that things have changed and that you're better now or whatever, but my face-to-face experience with you doesn't lend itself to my endorsement of your work ethic."
Yeah.
And so I can't.
Yeah. One way I like to kind of describe it to people is like, think of all of your closest friends, and then think if there's money on the line, who of your friends would you have on your team?
Yeah.
And I think if you're honest with yourself, I think a lot of people would knock off a lot of people from the list because they know certain things about reliability, about predictability, about how those people behave in social situations and stuff like that. So that's where you can kind of start to gauge like the way a business is looking at it, except take out even the friendship part of it. And then you're looking at like a hiring situation where it's like, they're just looking at a human being and looking at, okay, what is this person going to look like in context when I put them in a group? And there's like workplace law for like what can be said at the workplace. There's liability with that. There's liability all over the place. So like, how are we going to minimize that liability? And now I don't want to freak people out either, because I can say as like an art director, there are certain behaviors that might freak out like a marketing department that do not scare me in the slightest. And there is a certain amount of authenticity that can really work for an artist. Like for instance, if I'm like, interviewing somebody and they did a bunch of nude paintings, like that's not going to freak me out. It's like, that's part of art.
People who don't understand art might be like, whoa,
100%. Like if you were going for a different position somewhere else, that might be problematic. But I think for most artists, hiring artists are not going to be thrown off by that, or by like a tell-all kind of book, or by like a graphic novel that's super political. I think the art can go pretty far, because I think most artists are pretty understanding of art. And don't get me wrong, if it's really tasteless art, and it especially if it's tasteless without a reason, like which I've seen when reviewing portfolios, that's where like the red flags go up. But if it's impactful and it's kind of pushing the line, that can show really conceptual strength and stuff. However, that's very different from like if I notice on like a social media account, there's no filter whatsoever to that person's conduct. That can be a huge red flag. So it's I just think using wisdom in general, and like Corey was saying, like sometimes just treating people as if they're in front of you, is a good policy. Like, so like before engaging with someone, is this something you would really go far with in person? And one thing I'll say is, like, on social media, the only people I kind of go far with are usually friends or family. Those are the only people I'll really engage heavy in politics with, because it's like, we do that in person.
Right.
But if it's like a random stranger, I'm usually trying to find a path to peace with that kind of thing.
Yeah. Well, and I also think like, so that's the kind of the business side of it. I think we've kind of covered that pretty well. Yeah. One more minor comment, just to niche down in the comics industry.
Yeah.
Let's just say that your goal is to work for Marvel or DC, right? Okay, so that's a goal that some people have. Should you spend your time ripping people apart and naming names and all in the guise of being authentic? I don't want to just hide, blah 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 blah. Like, here's something that I do. I don't have that goal. I'm not terribly interested in working for either of those companies, mainly just because I don't think I could keep up with a monthly book. But the main thing is, like, I've read tons of comics that I've hated, but do you know which ones I talk about? The ones that I really like.
Yeah.
Because what's going to happen is, an editor or somebody is going to be like, oh man, I love the way this guy does whatever. Whatever. I don't know. Right now, it seems like if somebody was looking to do a story about bugs, then I'd be the guy to do it. But I draw more than that, but it doesn't seem like it lately. But if somebody was like, oh, Corey Kerr's the best of this, and then they go on Twitter and they see me like crap talking people by name and tearing down other people in the industry.
Yeah.
Two things come up. One is, it's like, well, that person's not going to be fun to work with. There are other people that can do the same thing. So I can just choose somebody who's going to be more of a pleasant situation. Right. So there's kind of that self-preservation. The other thing is the risk management is like, well, if that's how they treat like random strangers, like how are they going to treat, like, what if there's like, cause this happens all the time on a comic book team, like somebody misses a deadline, somebody has a bad day, there's internal communication and all this stuff. Like there's a certain level of expectation that like those are kept within the team, and you kind of keep, you don't publicly put people on blast for blowing a deadline or whatever.
Yeah.
And so there's a level of trust that they're like, well, maybe I'm not going to hire that person. And so like, even in your art, you can really shoot yourself in the foot, like depending on how you do that. You can either be a critic or a creator, but you can't be both. Like as soon as you start to publicly criticize in the area that you are trying to have success in, you're poisoning the well that you're trying to drink from.
Yeah, and so I think the thing I would say criticize, not critique, like, because I think sharing your opinion of a story or whatever isn't gonna like get you shot in the foot. What's gonna get you is like, let's say, and once again, this is just a matter of like putting yourself in the shoes of like, let's say you're a senior editor at Marvel, right? And you see this really promising artist, and then their whole Twitter feed is crap talking the company you work for.
Right.
It's going to be a hard sell to even get that person on board, even if you like them, because they've literally just like been negatively impacting the company you edit for. Another thing to keep in mind, and I always recommend this with just young cartoonists, is don't forget how small the comics industry is. Like, and don't assume that because like so-and-so's at Indie Isle and so-and-so's at like Marvel, that there's these worlds between them, because there's a lot of integration between, and there's a lot of like of fans of each other and friends of each other that just diverge all over the comics industry, from YA books like to like Captain Marvel to like all of these, like the mainstream stuff, the indie stuff, the underground stuff, the zinesters. It's a very small world for a business, and it's a small little community that really loves comics. So when you're interacting with other cartoonists, like, it's always good to just keep in mind, like, they might be the friend of the person you want to talk crap about. And keep in mind also, I've heard this from editors that I've talked to that work for some of the bigger publishers, that they've had cartoonists like crap talk 10 books they edited without realizing it when applying to be edited by this person.
Right.
And a lot of what they were critiquing was editorial decisions.
Right.
And so it's like, literally, can you imagine trying to get a job by going to a job interview and just crap talking the person that's interviewing you? Like, you know, and it's not, you're not being interviewed for a roasting position. So you're not, you know what I mean? Like, it's just something to consider, is like that, you know, you might not realize, but like the artist may not even be involved, but the book you're criticizing maybe was edited by a friend of the other editor that you're now submitting your work to. And they're like, you know, the worst thing, I heard this once from a friend of mine who works for a very large company. I'm not going to mention who they are, but they're one of the bigger tech companies that we use a lot, that has a lot to do with social media. Mm-hmm. And whenever people find out he works there, they'll ask, have you met the CEO? And his response, and pretty much everyone who works there's response is, no, and the CEO doesn't know who I am, and you don't want him to know who you are. Like, you don't want to meet the CEO at that company, because if you're meeting that often, it's, you know, that, at least in that instance, like they weren't the type of manager to like overburden people. So if they're meeting you a lot, there's something wrong. Similar thing with the comics industry. There's a good way to be known in the comics industry, but it's better to be unknown than be known as like the person not to hire. Like, you know what I mean? Like, there's a negative way of being known too. And imagine if you're that person who, like, your whole thing is just taking down an entire company, and then you're applying at that company. Like, if they know you, it might be bad. And that's a good scenario to like kind of measure it out to. That's not to say you shouldn't like share your opinions of a story and critique on story, but just be cautious not to get into personal critique where you're like, this person's a failure as a human being, because, and I've seen that a lot. And I'm like, so, and then you expect that failure of a human being to like look at your work and want to publish you? Like, no.
Well, and I think this is a good place to wrap it up because I think we're getting into another topic, but I think that should be the topic for next time.
Oh, 100%.
Is, what is an actual critique? Like an actual critique versus a personal attack. And there's some very slight differences that make a huge, huge difference in the effectiveness of your communication, as well as, like the time and place or whatever. Like if you came to me and asked for critique, I would not say, kind of seems like you're being kind of lazy on this.
Yeah.
Because I'm not critiquing the work. I just said a personal attack to you, but I could say, oh, it looks like the hand over here could use some work, or, the posture this way, and vice versa. I don't think you would ever tell me like, man, you're bad at this. That's a personal attack.
Yeah.
But being able to point out and say, oh, I don't know, Corey, I think you could work on like this. It looks like this could use some refinement, maybe like change the angle of this or whatever, like actionable things. I think that's a really interesting topic kind of along these lines. But
yeah, I agree. Victor mentioned the companies. Well, what did he say? Let's see here. Sorry. I want to address that and then we can wrap it. He said these companies are giving way to a lot of these new creators for bashing the readers for not agreeing with their points of view. That I'm mixed about, because like on one hand, I feel like you should be respectful of your customer. And so in that sense, I do feel like you should never bash your customer. However, I also feel like, like let's say I'm a huge fan of like a punk rock band that writes an anti-war an anti-war song. And then I go to that person and I'm like, I'm a big fan of war. Like, and then I'm shocked that they're like, dude, we're not really big fans of war. There are some cases where like the art itself should be a tell for like what can be a tell for like what the creators like. So like in my scenario, like I said, I'm pretty openly left leaning, and I don't agree with a lot of viewpoints, and I wouldn't shy away from saying I don't agree with a viewpoint, even if it was from somebody buying my stuff, if I disagreed. However, I would try to be respectful about it. So I think there's a line. Like my point is like, I don't think it would be wrong for me to like, let's say, I guarantee like half the people who even listen to us probably have differing viewpoints than I do on a lot of things. I wouldn't have a problem talking about that disagreement. I just think I would try not to cross that line where you're insulting, like you were just saying, where it's insulting the person rather than the argument. Right. And I think that's where it gets into shady territory of like, I'm kind of like agreeing but disagreeing, which I hope doesn't sound like a cop-out.
No, I think there's also this weird thing, and this isn't comic book industry. I think this is everywhere, where customers feel like they are due more than what they've paid for.
Yeah.
And like, I remember, having clients and having customers and having other business relationships where it's like our relationship actually stops well before what you're demanding of me right now.
Yeah.
And so in a lot of the interactions that I've seen, like just because I paid $5 for a book, I don't actually get to demand that person respond to a critique that I gave them, or whatever.
By you as a taxpayer or something, you know what I mean? It's not like a public service job that these people are working,
Right. And so I think there's an interesting balance, and to counter what I just said, I think a very solid rule of thumb is that attacking people is always a bad idea. Yeah. I don't like labels. I don't like categorizations. I don't like generalizations. I don't like stereotypes. And the reason for that is because they're all built to dehumanize somebody, to objectify somebody, to make them other than a person. And whenever you begin othering someone, you're actually doing that because this is getting deep into my philosophy, but just like it's difficult for you to intentionally hurt yourself, it's difficult for you to intentionally hurt somebody that you believe is a person.
Yeah.
And so if somebody cuts you off in traffic, your initial response, your initial angry response is to first dehumanize them so that you can lash out.
Yeah.
You don't say, "Oh, that contributing member of society and mother of three." That's not what you yell. You yell, "Oh, you stupid jerk, here's some sort of generalization category or whatever that I'm putting you in." Then because you've been dehumanized, I can attack you. And so I think whether it's the customers, whether it's the clients, whether it's business associates, whether it's the creators, the artists, the companies, anytime anyone online starts to other someone to dehumanize them, you're in territory you shouldn't be in, right? And I think that happens on both sides of that situation, especially in the comic book industry. I think it's difficult for people who have never made comics to understand the amount of sacrifice and all the moving parts and the long-term goals and the gatekeepers and everything that's going on. And so you just think that like that writer wrote something bad. Well, I don't know what 57 different variables, were in the equation that caused that particular decision, or whatever. But at the same time, on the flip side, to just say like, "Oh, you disagree with me, I will now, make a big generalization sweeping statement to disown what you're saying so that I can attack it," or whatever. You can always have a discussion of ideas. You can always have a discussion of principles if people want to discuss it. And nobody owes you a discussion. That's the other thing that I see a lot.
Yeah.
Is nobody owes you a discussion.
Yeah.
Who cares?
In logic, this is like kind of also steel man versus straw man, where it's like you don't want, like, creating an other is very much creating a straw man that you can then light on fire and be like, "I burnt the man, look how cool it is."
Right.
It's a lot harder to burn a steel man, like in an argument. And a solid argument will face on and own up to all of the weaknesses of your own argument. Like, and so like my point is, like, you're not seeing a lot of that going on the internet. A lot of the internet is like, you're whatever, so you believe this and you do this. You're telling people what they believe and what they think, and you're making a lot of presumptions and kind of labeling those people. And I see it on both sides with like creators and fans. A lot of the time it is a fan just telling a creator, like, "You believe this and you wrote this, so therefore you're trying to do this." Right. And it's like, how do you know what they're trying to do? Like, maybe they agree with you, Yeah. And that's the bizarre thing is, like, I think it is one of those scenarios where, like Corey was saying, like, just kind of approaching it from the standpoint of this person's a human being. They probably have some reasons for what they believe. Something else I've been finding, we got to wrap this, but something else I've been finding really useful with politics, because I am open about my political viewpoints online. Something I've been wanting to try out more and more, I've been doing it in person and I should start doing it online, is just starting a discussion with a disagreement with just asking, "Well, what do you think I believe?"
Yeah.
Like, because I actually think that opens up kind of some of the perception gaps that can cause conflict, where it's like, "Oh, you think I'm for this," and that's not the case. Like, you know what I mean? You can kind of dismantle some of that. So I agree with the bandwagons thing from Caitlin too. It is crazy how quickly we like to band together as tribes and then fight other tribes. But as individuals, we're like a lot less likely to be like, "Let's take on like the other tribe." As individuals, we're a little more likely to like maybe have those conversations of like, "Hey, what do you think I believe?" And then in return, like, that's not to say like all exchanges are going to go well. And that's not to say that like just because you're a customer at a restaurant, you can be a jerk to the waiter just because you're paying. Like, that's just a badly managed restaurant, if that's allowed. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
because I do want to say that, like, if we're trying to judge things by the standard of commerce, don't forget, like, businesses often have the right to kick out the customer if the customer is being unwieldy and rude and like treating the employees like crap. And so, like, that's another thing I think that gets lost in the equation, especially in the comics thing, where a lot of people will be judgmental of like a comic publisher for like backing up their people. And it's like, well, I don't know. Cause like, if I walk into my workplace and there's a customer just irately like chewing out one of my staff members, and I look into it and it's the customer that's out of line, I might just kick that customer out. Because I'd be like, dude, you don't get to treat my people that way. That's not cool. You know?
Yeah.
It's a weird, it's like I said, it's easier when it's black and white, but it's gray.
Yeah. Unfortunately, once you start getting past the age of 23, your brain has the ability to see the nuance in the world, and you forever will lose. There's a neurologist that studied this. His name will come to me. Anyway, he says that one of the things that's difficult about your early 20s is that you're actually mourning the loss of the ability to see black and white. Like you lose the neurological ability to categorize something as good or bad, black or white, this or that. And you realize like, oh, there's ambiguity and there's levels of gray and there's ranges of things and there's situations that change things to be different. And as soon as you come into that situation, a lot of your cognitive dissonance is actually based on the fact that you mourn the simplicity that you've lost, because the world as a 9-year-old, as a 12-year-old, as a 17-year-old is actually really simple. Like, it's because your brain doesn't have the neurological ability to see complexity. Yeah. And so then during that turmoil of complexity, you're kind of just in this turmoil. And after that trial, there's another guy that came out and he talked about this simplicity before complexity, the complexity within complexity, and then the simplicity after the complexity. There is a level of simplicity that you can get to where you embrace the nuance and you embrace the ambiguity and you accept that you could be wrong and that doesn't mean that you're less than. And I'll just bring Kayla up here. As a 20-year-old, it is very confusing, and I kind of hate your gray areas. And I will say this: that is neurologically appropriate for your development. And give it a year or two, and you'll be fine.
Yeah,
give it 5 to 10 years, and you'll be great.
When I was 20, I would not tolerate ambiguity, and as just a fiery personality, I just couldn't stand ambiguity. But it's kind of a similar thing to, like, it's easy to have the attitude of always being right until you're wise enough to realize you've been wrong.
Yeah.
And once that's opened and unlocked and you've actually been honest about it, it's really hard to proceed forward with the assumption that you're always right, because in the past I've been wrong about this and this and this and this. So maybe, like, there's a possibility what I'm saying could be wrong. And that usually gives you a much better interactions with people you disagree with, because if you start with the assumption of, like, I could actually be wrong.
I'm really glad I don't believe what I used to believe. So.
Oh yeah, I think I would argue, like I said, I wouldn't want to meet the 20-year-old me. I'd annoy the hell out of myself. I'd be like, what are you talking about? You moron.
Very true. So yeah. So anyway, the gray will go on and on. So bring some crayons and add some color. I think that's a good way to end it. Anyway, it was an interesting topic because I wanted to bring that up because I've seen a bunch of people do it a bunch of different ways. I know some people that are like, I don't talk about religion. I don't talk about politics. I don't talk about money. I don't talk about this. I know other people that are like, I talk about money all the time because I think it's something that everybody needs to understand and know and whatever. And I think there's room for nuance and there's room for people being comfortable with a specific level of sharing and what you're sharing, but I think it's important, if you haven't sat down and thought about it, to think beyond yourself, because in a public setting, whether that be face-to-face or online or, in a crowded movie theater or whatever, you're not the only person that's experiencing what's going on. And whether that be a future employer, whether it be a current employer, whether it be a future spouse or friend or collaborator on a project, just know that what you do is going to have an impact. Yeah. What you don't do is going to have an impact. And if you make decisions with empathy, and be authentic by becoming somebody who is empathetic, then you're going to be fine. And you're going to lose out on some opportunities, and you're going to gain some others. You're going to alienate some people, and you're going to, nobody can be everything to every person. Yeah. And I don't think that's what we're saying. But I think it's just important to be empathetic in your communication publicly. I think that's the main point. So great comments in the chat. Anything you want to say to wrap up?
I have one thing to say to wrap up, which is a trope set in business. So, and I think it should just apply to life in general. But I remember like 5 different people telling me this when I got into teaching, and then reiterating it when I got into art direction from there. You have to pick which hill you're going to die on.
Yeah.
And that literally goes across the board. Like, that's a good question to ask before firing off like an angry tweet or whatever. Is this the hill I want to die on? There's a couple things I'll post about on social media and I'm fired up about, and I have thought about it and been like, that is a hill I would die on.
Yeah.
And those are the times you want to take stands, and times where you actually want to not play the ambiguous card if it's a hill you're willing to die on. But if not, is it really worth it? And that's a good thing. And especially as you get further and further in the industry, like you get you only get so many opportunities and so many battles. So, like the one you go full bore on, you really want to be smart about.
And that hill is a hill that you could win as well.
Yeah.
And so you might die, and it's a worthy place to die, but it's also a situation where, if somebody's like, they're doing something and they see a lack of a specific type of thinking in their company, and they see you make a stand on that thing, they're like, adding him to my company would be good because he feels strongly about X, and I feel like we lack X.
Yeah.
And so it could be good, but I think it is important to kind of make that value judgment. So yeah, and some people make decisions with flamethrowers. So Sam's just burning everything to the ground. So, all right, if you want to check out Josh's stuff and see the hills that he's willing to die on, then go to joshuakimball.com. Actually, a lot of really interesting editorial stuff there, as well as a comic about faith and mental illness, which are 2 things that some people actively choose to stay away from. So go check out Quarterly Stories, which is there as well, which is the one I was talking about. Really, really raw, deep dive into depression and anxiety and faith and suicide, and lots of interesting topics that are going on. And it's an auto-bio, so you can check that out. If you want to see my stuff, go to CoreyKerr.com and go see my intentionally ambiguous stickers and try to guess what I'm saying, which is the point, because I'm trying to be more thought-provoking with those stickers than I am decisive. So I just like it when people think about things more than not. So anyway, you can check both of those things out. And if you would like to stream in that way that we are streaming right now, then you can check out StreamYard. And StreamYard does a lot of really cool things. And the link to that is at the top of this page, CoreyKerr.com/48HR. I feel like we should pimp out all the rest of our affiliate links or whatever There's an Audible one and all the rest, and so whatever. So if you want to support this show, that's a good way of doing it. At some point, I just started a Ko-fi or a coffee. I don't know what that's called, the KO-FI. We need to start doing that, and Patreon and some other things. But anyway, you guys are awesome. Great chat today. Have a good night, and we will catch you next week. Go make stuff and tell people about it.
Yeah.
And now the long pause as we end the broadcast.
Yeah.
We should just freeze now.